Time to call this meeting to order. Looks like we have quorum here today. We're gonna start with introductions and Ken, if you want to start off and kind of introduce yourself, your kind of history, what you bring to the Housing Commission, what you'd like to see the direction it going.
Thank you. Well, greetings. I'm happy to be here. My name is Ken Gurney. I have a desire to serve the community with where I live. I have currently, or have been for the last couple of years, been a member of the Brownfield Commission. And we've done some stuff kind of in conjunction here when there's been a piece of property that can be turned into housing, offering some rebates and government incentives and those kind of things to keep things going. But I have noticed that there's a real acute shortage of housing in Ottawa County. And we've got a number of people who can't live here, whose children can't live here. And as I was telling Paul earlier, suddenly I've got this interest. I'm asking everybody where they live, and I'm finding out that a lot of people don't live here, but they work here. And they're taking the money that they make here back to someplace else and spending it, so it's not good for us. So that's my interest in this. I come from the automobile industry, about 30 years of working in management, making cars and trucks. So that's me. Hope I can be useful.
Well, GM report.
Chrysler.
Chrysler. Oh, Mopar, right?
Sorry, I didn't mean to say it with that tone.
That's okay. All right, well, welcome. We're excited to have you. We got a lot of fun moving parts in this commission, and it's a lot thanks to these guys being here as well. So next up is public comments. Anybody have anything? Come on up.
Here, update on behalf of Lakeshore Habitat and Jubilee. I'm Dave Rosman, the Executive Director of Lakeshore Habitat. For those that I have met, Ken, nice to meet you. Ottawa Townhomes for Jubilee and Lakeshore Habitat has kicked off. I just saw Jubilee has actually framed in their first 3-unit townhome and is starting on their next one. And so they really, I was talking to Steve yesterday, they were able to accelerate that project due to the generous support of the county. We're actually starting to dig our foundations this week, as long as weather cooperates and we're on schedule. One just kind of high level update as well from us. You know, we're just like Ken said, we see the need for housing in the county, and we're trying to be pretty aggressive about finding potential projects. And we've been very blessed with having people come to us with potential properties. So Lakeshore Habitat, we're actually in conversation with related to a donation of property that would be a potential 25 Habitat homes in Ottawa County, and then jointly us and Jubilee. I can't provide a lot of details, but we have an MOU to allow us to do some due diligence on some property that has potentially over 100+ units in it. So we're, as soon as we can share more, we will, but those are, you know, some of those we've been working on for 2 years. So it takes a long time, but we're actively trying. So, what do you think?
Appreciate it. Thanks, Dave. All right, up next is the approval for the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as written? All in favor? Approval for minutes from the last meeting, August 7th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as written? Is there a second? Second. Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we call this old business, but it's still ongoing business. Small footprint home project update. Matt, Nick, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, so all I have is last night I sent an email to the housing commissioners. I can include you too, Ken. That includes all the drive links to now all of the concepts, and their context that we've developed, and then propagated the construction documents over. So we have, I guess for Ken, 4 different sizes of home plans that we're producing that will be open source. And right now we're stepping through the process of making sure we have our ducks in a row as far as things are documented and like really readable for contractors and the people who are going to be picking up these plans to use, and then have our details well outlined so that someone doesn't have a ton of questions when they get to the field. And so that's part of what we're stepping through now to get to a place where we can say, okay, these are now open source and we feel comfortable with people taking these. So all of the preliminary work for that's been done, and those should be available to all of you. And then I'm working on getting something set up with Nick to review all of those plan sets. So there are four, footprints that we have, ranging from 440 square feet to 1,056 square feet is our largest concept. And then we've kind of dressed the exteriors for all four of those, home plans to fit into some context areas that we've determined to exist in Ottawa County based on some character defining features work that we've done. So we went around the county and cataloged architectural details and site features in places like Spring Lake, Grand Haven, Holland. And then from that, we've determined that there's kind of a dune context, forest, rural, and in-town setting where each of these homes could land. And so our response to that has been dressing the exteriors, just changing details, siding, trim, millwork to kind of reflect where these homes might land. So that's the work we've been up to, and that's kind of where we're at. So looking forward, we're gonna be reviewing those sets and working towards a goal of making them source, right?
So Matt, will these plans be like ready for submission to, local municipalities? Like it's a set of, architectural plans so that they could review and approve it and know what they're building?
Yeah, so we've been in contact with the zoning official in Grand Haven, Scott Corbett, and he's sat down with me and provided feedback through all of the sheet sets, to just ensure code compliance. And then obviously they won't be zoning compliant and all, local units of government, but code compliance for sure. And then the last hurdle that we're working to get over right now is getting an energy study done for all of the plans. So I've been in contact with someone from Red Fox, which is a company that Scott recommended to me that basically does like the energy study. And that's just that's one of the boxes you have to check to get a permit. And so that's, I think, the means that we're gonna go through to.
So any resident of the county could take these plans and without additional cost be able to submit them, other than of course buying permits and zoning and all of that, but that the plans themselves would be ready for approval, assuming they get by the zoning.
Correct.
That's great.
Is there help we're gonna offer, a contractor, an individual who wants to to make one of these to get through the zoning issues?
Yeah, so I guess I could kind of defer to you two on this, but it depends who approaches the county looking for the plan. If it's a developer or someone who's looking to volume build, that's a little different situation than an individual, which we've already had individuals that we've met with that have come forward and said that I want a small footprint home. How can I build this? And so to that individual, we certainly have a list of contractors that have reached out and said, we just want to be a part of the project and are happy to help in any way. And so that's something I think that the county would be happy to provide to an individual seeking to build a home if they weren't already connected with a contractor as a resource.
So I guess I'm a new guy, maybe I'm just asking a
No,
bunch
sure.
of questions, but, so I have these things and I go forward. There's a zoning problem if I want to build it in Spring Lake or whatever. Who's gonna help me get through the zoning problem, and are these jurisdictions, cities, towns, whatever they are they interested in doing this, or are they gonna block it, or what is their mindset, and how can we help them understand how things need to change?
You're right up there.
Yeah,
You're right there.
This
You're
is,
caught up.
I mean, it sounds to me like everybody's for this as long as it's not next door to them.
yeah, that's that
That's the
mindset
mindset,
that
yeah.
we need to overcome. And so all of this work and the exceptional design work that Matt has done is building us out to, and we've been doing some strategy sessions myself with Matt and Nick and then with the strategic impact team. We have all these designs ready. As Nick or Matt had mentioned, right? You might have individuals that want to build, you might have developers. Ultimately, where we want to go with the package, once they're all together, there will be open source and available. But we need to put this in a presentation format, if you will, to more strongly work with local units of government. Talk about the opportunities, talk about the designs, talk about the costs, the practicality of this product type. And encourage zoning changes to make this happen. So as residents approach us, that just builds up more advocates, opponents for this work. That can have a strong influence on local units of government, knowing that there's a swell of individuals that want to do that. So we would be working with local governments on a case-by-case basis on those that are listening. We're having those conversations now with them. And then from the developer perspective, we've got several irons in the fire in that regard too. So, okay, we want to build the smaller footprint homes, and we got to get through navigate the barriers of local zoning. We are willing to walk alongside that as a developer and builder to go do that work. But there are certain criteria and expectations to this. To make this product palatable for the community and blend into it. Site design is just as important, if not as important, as the individual product itself. There have been developers approaching the counties, and we'd love to build smaller footprint homes and share a site plan. No, that's just not it. We need to create communities that reflect who we are and what we look like, and that have a real thoughtfulness to spatial layout. We would be willing to support projects like that and go through local zoning challenges with the right type of product. So as we kind of package up all of this work, we're gonna create those expectations. We'll build them into these sheet sets. We've been talking about a system to kind of track who's downloading this product so we know who's using it and how it might be utilized. Ultimately, yes, all that stuff is coming together to then advocate for change. It's where it has to start. And the project we have going on right now in the City of Holland is just hopefully just the first of several projects that we can start to walk through and show the practicality of this type of product and just encourage it across the board.
Well,
Yes,
have we
to add.
looked at, packaging up like a zoning variance language that we could take to the various townships and, you know, that eliminates some of the work that they have to do, which might appeal to the zoning board that, you know, that we've gone through all of the thought processes and, you know, here's a variance that you could use for individual properties, and here's one for you know, like a 1 acre development where you put in multiple homes. And in that, you could probably address a lot of the pushback issues. How do we know it's gonna be durable? How do we know it's gonna look right? And, you know, but by giving them that boilerplate, it might just save us a lot of back and forth with them.
Yes, great suggestion, and that is something that the team has been working on, and each local unit is unique. So a standard ordinance template and recommendations that they just plug and play, there's some nuances locally, so we're writing this almost as a white paper to explain the why and then the how and offer suggestions that they can take to their contractual planner for them build into their zoning. So yes, thinking similarly along that lines, and that'll be part of that overall package of education.
And without local residents of each municipality requesting this, or I don't want to say demand, but enthusiastically requesting an option like this, we can only do so much, but it has to come from the residents. So we're building awareness as much as we can in building, you know, the City of Holland project goes through, then we have a tangible, hey, this is what it could look like, and be able to walk people through and then say, here's an option. We have the data to support it. We have the product to support it. We have the demand to support it. We're working on the supply and the, you hit the nail on the head already, Ken, is the local municipality, zone. That's our biggest hurdle.
So
There's no,
how do
there's
you
no
move
perfect
that?
answer.
How do you, I'm just going
Yeah.
here, I'm sorry, how do you move that along?
Continued education and advocacy. So for example, there is a township that we've been engaging with more recently in the county because they have property owners and residents that want to build this product type. Current zoning will not let them build anything less than 1,080 square feet. So when they have asked, can I build a 950 square foot home that hits my price point? They have been told by the planner, no, I'm sorry. So then we have conversations with the supervisor, and then we find out, when is the community gonna be looking at their zoning? Well, they might be going through some master planning right now, so give us a few months. So we're just navigating relationships, timing, and again, building up that support with residents that want this, and having the local units of government have a listening ear, getting that listening ear, is part of this work. Building this information to share and educate sounds easier than it is.
Oh, it sounds very difficult.
Yeah,
Well, so we have all the commissioners that cover the whole county, right? Are all those commissioners, since we're doing this work at their behest, are they all in favor of this?
I haven't heard anyone say otherwise.
So could we ask each one of them to sponsor a small housing development in their district?
We could,
And shepherd it
do
through the
that,
zoning things
right?
inside of their district?
yeah, it's finding the right property, which I was assessing, finding the right builder, finding the right community that's willing to listen. But yes, and as we create this package of information, so we're close to pulling it all together. So this is part of the long game.
Yeah.
Yes.
it's helpful to hear a fresh perspective on it,
It
so
is, yeah,
don't
yeah.
feel bad about the questions. Yeah, I would just say, one of the interesting things about the project is that it's not every day that there's a county government that is in this position, because even though each municipality is unique, the county government gets to kind of stand outside that local municipality and yet still be local. And there's not so many individual units of government that the Department of Strategic Impact, can't track all of them. So part of it is just kind of developing an understanding of the lay of the land. Which townships are kind of have an appetite for this, which ones are lukewarm, which ones are like a real uphill battle. And having that kind of understood at a county level is helpful, so that when developers come in with interest, there's some of that insight. Because again, you're sort of monitoring all of the units of government, but in a very local way, and yet not totally tied to any one individual unit of government. And it's so I'll speak to a couple of other things just to kind of help bring you up to speed. We're being pretty protective of the application of these small footprint homes, just given the NIMBYism that's out there. We don't want the small footprint home to get built in a way where the NIMBYs can point at it and say, see, didn't turn out good at all, so we were right. And so any project that goes beyond a certain threshold of scale and size, we're not just looking for any piece of land, we're looking for the piece of land that allows for the development to hook itself into a community in really strategic and synergizing ways. So it can't just be, a cornfield that somebody left to a church in their will, and just because that's the piece of land that's available, that's what we're gonna go towards. Got to be close to an elementary school, or some groceries, or some jobs, or some transportation, or hopefully all of those things. So that's part of it, and then that site design, as Paul spoke to, is also a huge part of it, so that when the small footprint homes do get deployed, they're deployed in a way that's gratifying to them, that lends itself to them looking good and effective, so that the project as a living example can help further zoning reform in other parts of the county. The one other thing relative to zoning that's on the table today in many municipalities is the planned unit development. It's a zoning tool that's on the books, that's available to anybody who wants to take a crack at it. And it is a rezoning. You're essentially legally applying for a rezoning, but your zoning goes from whatever it was, low density residential or medium density residential, to a new zoning called PUD, planned unit development. And what it basically allows you to do, and this varies from township to township to some degree, but it allows you to kind of tailor your zoning based on letting it be informed by the underlying zoning that it was, but also some of the differences and nuances that you might need. And what the process requires is it requires the developer to go above and beyond in terms of public engagement, and oftentimes above and beyond in terms of livability, amenities, and other aspects of the project. So the municipality is kind of looking at it as, we can get somebody who's willing to go above and beyond, and we can open up this PUD tool to them, but we're not just giving out PUDs. There's strings attached. So we're in a process right now in the city of Holland where we're doing that. And if you look at the underlying zoning, we are departing from what the underlying zoning calls for. I wouldn't say we're breaking rules, because we're not, but we're departing from what the baseline by right zoning is on the parcels that we're working on. And what's nice about it is it allows us to engage with city staff very early, make sure that they agree that the parcel and the houses and the layout and all of those details are a good candidate for PUD, kind of get them to start thinking about it. They then help us bring it to the planning commission. So we just went through this, and it was good to see you guys all at the study center. We had a study session with the planning commission a few weeks ago in the city to review our first project, which has currently 8 small footprint houses and then an existing building on it as well in the city. We got good feedback. We got some tangible feedback around, vegetation, around accessibility. Storage was a big feedback item that, they asked us to kind of be even more thoughtful about. And also the issue of home ownership. So how does this development or neighborhood or community, what is the policy that's being thought of around renter versus home ownership? So we took all that feedback back, and we're working on it kind of offline, but we're going to be having, as a part of as a requirement of the PUD process, a public open house on October 7th, I believe. I don't quote me on that, because I should verify that date. Maybe you can verify it. I think it's on our calendars. That public open house is slated to be at Central Avenue Reformed Church in downtown Holland. And we'll be there. We'll be there with the site plan, the house plans. And everybody within a certain radius, I think it's 600-foot radius of the site, will be invited via a mailer to come and provide feedback. And then we've got a civil engineering partner that we're planning to onboard that's going to help us bring our site design to a technical level that's can go into PUD approval. And we're eyeing December for PUD approval. So that kind of gets into your question a little bit, because we're not actually taking on the zoning issue in the conventional way. We're using a PUD tool, but it turns out PUD tools are available in a lot of places. And if you can develop a culture, a local culture that's pretty good at doing PUDs and not abusing the tool to give it a bad name, but actually using it in the way that it's intended to be used, there's a lot of communities where we can do a lot of housing with PUDs. And then if we do good PUDs, we can point to them as examples, those lend themselves to more kind of by right zoning reform. To be honest, I'm not hanging my hat on by right zoning reform within the next months or years. That's a long-term project. But in the meantime, given the housing gap that we have and the portion of that housing gap that we think could be addressed with small footprint, which is a small slice of the pie, we can do a lot with just single infill and PUD. Now, single infill may need some variance language, Pat, because if we're at 1080 and we need to get down to 960, like, come on, guys. Like, we might be willing to go to bat for some variance language, but variance isn't by right. Variance is still, you got to take an extra step.
A one-off, right?
Yeah. So we've got
that's kind of our that's our current strategy. And our current tangible iron and fires is one project. We've got, I would say, 3 or 4 other kind of promising irons in the fire that would probably take similar approaches.
Also looking at a ADU type of situation, accessory dwelling unit is, huge request from clients of mine, that are saying, hey, you know, I have aging family members that I would love to bring on my 2-3 acres, or whatever it may be. Plenty of room, plenty of option for that, but it's just not allowed. So it is, it's tough because it is one-off, because every municipality is different. They require allow, so. Awareness is huge. Yeah, yep,
But because of that, it's a perfect thing
Right.
for a county government to take up a project like this. You know, that every municipality is different. That's perfect for Department of Strategic Impact. Because it can gauge all those differences, and sort of get strategic about where to address this stuff. State that, you know, there's no other tier of government that's so well suited for addressing those differences across a region.
One of the things that comes to mind is, anytime you want to build support is who's got skin in the game. And I think employers who are paying, you know, between $18 and $24 an hour have skin in the game, because if they're people that are working within that pay range can't afford to live in the county and they're commuting, the likelihood of turnover increases exponentially. And what I'd like to offer, and I would be very happy to host something at my little farm, to do a workshop where we try to figure out, you know, how do we go out and build consensus? What would be the steps? Where could we find allies? Because I think if we found 10 or 15 employers of, you know, 20+ people that all agreed, yeah, this is a serious issue, and they know the people that are working for them that would like to have that suddenly you get this huge number of people that would, you know, say, yeah, I'll go to whatever township would, you know, allow me to, you know, build, and I might find other properties that would, you know, be suitable for that, but, I think our biggest obstacle when we go to these townships is they're like, well, you guys have a very interesting concept here, and, yeah, you know, that's definitely worthy of some consideration. We'll take it on advisement, you know, we'll get to it when we can, but, you know, we're real busy. We got a lot of stuff going on, and thank you so much for coming in and sharing your thoughts. And, you know, but if you show up with 40 or so people saying, you know, we really need this here, and we got to get you guys on board, and, you know, it's a completely different reaction.
Agreed. Yeah, that need to continue to build support and advocates for the work of the business community is a big one. Housing Next is an entity that has been around for a while, and Lakeshore Advantage is in that space as well with workforce housing. So more conversations with them and pulling that business community in is going to go a long way. And I also think that the big opportunity, which to reiterate for your benefit, which we're all seeing in the space, the conversations are so often about subsidies. When we look at this space of just building a smaller home, that is, they're all over this county. We used to build them. That is one of the easiest, most pragmatic ways to get more housing stock that people want.
Free of subsidy,
Yes,
available to anybody. There's no, you know, income qualifying,
easily repeatable.
and it's
Yeah.
repeatable, and
so we,
and I think it'll build momentum. You know, once people realize it's not the demise of the culture of the community, but rather it's a strengthening
yes.
of the culture.
So to take this work of Matt and Nick at this housing commission and elevate it outside of these walls, if you will, and do a larger event, I think goes a long way, especially when you take into consideration the housing needs assessment data that looked at rental units and for sale units. Rental units, it's already on track in the building space. Construction is on track to hit our needs. The missing area is between those making $51,000 up to $80,000 to $90,000 for sale units. This small foot home opportunity fits that need right there. More people, and we gotta change the mindset.
Once this whole package is all put together, are there plans to have like a forum for each township? Like, hey, we have 30 people from Robinson Township that reached out. Join this forum, join this group, whatever it is. Talk amongst yourselves, get ready to go to the township and propose zoning change. You know, get signatures wherever you need to.
Great strategy.
Just put them all in
Yeah.
contact with each
Yep.
other.
That's the only way it's going to happen.
Yes. Because we've got a list of residents that call us all the time. I think some of that data was compiled for the work session in the City of Holland. So yes, we'll utilize those people. I think it's a great approach when we're ready to do that. Really get boots on the ground and get into the doors of township halls.
Yeah, I think it's a good, you raise a good point, is that the release of this package is a moment for the county, and for any resident or would-be resident in the county. And it's an opportunity for us to be very clear and raise awareness. And one of the impressions that would be helpful, I think would be helpful, is you live in Ottawa County, this thing comes out, you're able to access these things for free, only to come to the realization that you can't do it in your township.
Right.
And that's gonna highlight the barrier in a very acute, serious way for a lot of people. I could do this. Even the county thinks that this would be something reasonable for me to consider, and yet I don't have the right to do it in my particular unit of government. So that awareness, there's an opportunity there.
I do, like a list of townships and when their next zoning meeting is gonna be. Like, okay, here's your information, go out. Take it from here. Obviously, we can't from the county level be overbearing down the townships, but we can incite the people to.
Yeah, I think it says something though, because a lot of times zoning restrictions are on the basis of context. Is this thing harmonious with surrounding context, right? That's kind of zoning language. And it's hard to make that claim when here's the county, which is also local, basically saying these are county, these belong in Ottawa County. So it's conflicting with the zoning just in an implied way.
In the boots on the ground research that you guys did about taking pictures of, hey, here's what Holland shows. We used to build these, right?
Mhm.
So it is harmonious because it's
Mhm.
already here.
Yeah.
It's just bringing it back as an option. Yeah.
But these drawings have the county's logo.
Right.
And so it's not a foreign drawing coming in and being brought into a township where it doesn't belong. It's a local drawing in the locality. So it should, I think it would be healthy if it did challenge those zoning ordinances just in terms of what it implies.
I think what we're lacking is the conversation has started in a lot of these municipalities from a local level. They hear about it from news release or something like that, but when you sit face to face with somebody and say, here's the data, here's local residents that want this, and it's in direct, battle between your zoning right now and what the residents actually need. Someone gotta give, right? If we didn't have a housing shortage, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So.
Is there any, limit to the size, by limit, what's the minimum size that plot of land to be considered for a PUD has to be?
It depends on the zoning ordinance in the municipality. So in the city of Holland, there isn't a minimum size for what's considered a conventional PUD, but they have a different kind of PUD called a cluster PUD, where the minimum turns out to be 2 acres. And so you can tailor that within your zoning ordinance, and different communities have different answers to that question. I was involved in a PUD in the city of Holland that was like it was like 0.17 acres.
Really?
So it was a tiny little parcel. And in fact, the reason it was a PUD was it was really too small. And so it was too small to accept a duplex on it, but as a PUD, it was able to get a duplex site design. I want to just, before we stop this topic for today, I want to just touch base with you all, and Ken, you weren't on the email thread. And I can forward you the email thread, but on the PUD in Holland, one of the feedback items that we received was from Mayor Box. He thought it would be, he had a concern that the developer could develop the site and operate the site as rentals for a long time, which is the plan, 10 or 20 years. But when they sell, they could sell off the houses, and those houses, there'd be no control over whether those houses would be homeowner occupied or rental. And so it started a conversation around, should there be an HOA that somehow governs operations of the site down the road if this developer were to ever sell? Or should there be a condo docs right out of the gate that start to speak into that? Or should there be a deed restriction even that requires that after the developer sells these down the road in this hypothetical situation, that they can only be used as an owner occupied residence? And so one of the tasks that came out of the study session was the planning commission tasked city staff check with their legal team to see if the city could require that as a condition for PUD. So we took that back and wanted to find a way to kind of address that feedback, but also find a middle way solution. We didn't feel, and I personally don't feel that it's appropriate for us to hang a deed restriction requirement on the entire development for some hypothetical that might be 20 years from now. We don't know what the housing market will be at that point. That there's a lot of kind of resilience and future proofing that it gets given up if the developer, which is a nonprofit developer, just gives up its ability to operate some as rentals and some as homeowner occupied in the future. And so we talked quite a bit over email. Paul and I had some conversations, and then you guys were brought in on email, and I had some conversations with city staff offline about this, as well as the developer, Doors of Hope. And we came up with a strategy that basically said, city, rather than going and finding out what you can force us to do, we will voluntarily sign up for 3 of these houses to be deed restricted. We will agree, and the deed restriction only kicks in if they ever sell. They may never sell, but if they ever sell, they're agreeing to deed restrict 3 of them for being owner occupied. They will also agree to establish an HOA in that event, and condo docs. And so the number 3, I think, is a good number because you've got basically 9 rental units. 8 of them are small footprint homes. The existing building has an apartment in the upstairs. So you've got 9 dwelling units. 3 of them ensures that if the whole thing got sold off, it couldn't all get sold to like a corporate entity in New Jersey who operates it just as rentals and who could do away with the condo docs and the HOA. There would still be 3 other entities, homeowners, that would still have seats at the table of the HOA. And it would also ensure that that number doesn't go down to such a number where some homeowner feels like they're on an island in a situation where everything else is turned over to rental. But I think it's really important also that the deed restrictions the individual houses don't get chosen today. It's just a quota that they agree to fill later. Because I've been involved in some projects where you're trying to transition the development to maybe own to sort of a sale, and maybe there's an 80-year-old who lives in one of the units, or there's somebody who, there's people who are still living their lives there, and you don't get to pick today which units are gonna be tied up in that way. And so if you were to sell the whole development off and have the deed restrictions already chosen on which parcels or which houses are gonna receive them, that could accidentally, inadvertently cause a displacement of a resident at the point of that transition. So it'd be much more flexible if they could say, these empty units that we've emptied out already and we're kind of prepping for transition, those are the ones that we're gonna deed restrict at that time. These other ones who still have residents in them, we're gonna allow those to remain as rentals. We're gonna even hold them, keep them as rentals, and we're gonna continue to be the landlords, but sell off, other parts of the development and so on. So the city felt like that was a good approach, and I think was, they expressed that they also liked that it wasn't sort of a legal requirement coming from their side, but more of a voluntary thing. And the developer has stated that they're comfortable with it because it aligns with sort of conventional norms within, condo associations today. So I just wanna, the reason I'm bringing it up, and it's detailed out in that thread, but trying to, remind you of some of the details, is we want to make sure that that this feels like it aligns with the Housing Commission's emphasis on homeownership. So again, we have 9 units. Many more of them could become homeowner occupied. We're not saying that it has to be capped. We're just saying that the minimum would need to be 3.
So technically speaking, only 3 are gonna be deed restricted, but they could sell each one individually as
Yep.
homeowner.
They could be 9 out of 9 at some point.
Gotcha.
But we're just saying, let's hold the minimum.
That's
So that we don't have one homeowner who's, the only homeowner at the table at the HOA.
Right.
But we have sort of a healthy balance at a minimum.
What brought you to 3 units instead of more?
I think we were kind of toggling between 3 and 4, and we wanted to bring something to the city that we felt like was substantial enough to feel like, hey, those homeowners are gonna feel like they've got some strength in numbers. But we didn't want to overdo it. And I feel like we had some room. If the planning commission said, yeah, 3's not enough, we have some room to go to 4, and we're not really changing the overall dynamic of that.
Yeah.
I feel really comfortable at 3 or 4. I think going to above half feels like we're stepping into a little bit too much burden on the property. Because you're giving up property rights when you hang a deed restriction on a property. So trying to balance that, there are resale property value implications to saying, hey, you're giving up rights as a property owner here. So trying to kind of flirt with the 50%, but not go up above and beyond that if we can avoid it.
Right.
I think we can avoid it. I think this was a question out of curiosity and just trying to make sure that they were covering their bases. I didn't
Right.
sense it as like a really strong emphasis on this.
Yeah.
But I think it also, 3 is big enough that, from my perspective, allows us to speak about, even from a housing commission standpoint, as this is a housing commission initiative, like, yeah, homeownership wasn't forgotten and it's part of the PUD conditions.
Right, yeah, because when we first started this process, what, a year and a half ago, it was very evident of, homeownership being the key, right? It was, that housing as a ladder, that first or second rung just doesn't exist anymore for first time home buyers.
For wealth generation over time.
Yeah, yep. So that's, as long as that is key for our conversations moving forward for other municipalities, that's. Because City Holland's not gonna be alone in that.
Mhm.
More municipalities are gonna be like, we don't just want 100% rental.
Right.
Properties, because that does affect cultures in local areas, so.
Just to look back, when as I recall, there was a study of what the housing shortage was in the county at the current time. What was that number?
The recent.
It's like
The
15,000.
recent one, and that's a combination of rental and for sale. So I have the numbers just on my top of my head for the for sale units. Under 51% AMI, that need for sale units is just under 300. And that's in the more nonprofit supportive services space. Between 51% AMI up to 120%, AMI, it's about 9,000 for sale units needed,
that we're short of.
That's Ottawa and Kent, or just Ottawa?
just Ottawa.
So 9,000 is a big number. If we're doing 8 here and 3 there, we'll never get there. So, I mean, it's stating the obvious, I suppose, but wouldn't it be wise to try to think a little bigger and ask ourselves, like, you know, how are we going to achieve 9,000 more units in the county without like breaking everything? And is it even possible? And, you know, maybe we can do 3,000, which is only a third of the need, but that's still a huge number compared to what we're talking about here. And, you know, otherwise we'll never catch up. I mean, this would be a problem that'll exist for an eternity, you know, barring some major population decline. Would it be worthwhile to have a workshop where we are, you know, able to just focus on that 9,000 number? And what are the different ways it could be done?
Yes.
Uh,
And yes, a workshop or just getting some additional information. What I would love to pursue, and probably have to do this in collaboration with an external consultant, is do an assessment of all areas of infrastructure. And then look at available properties and underutilized properties, and also understand the water capacity for additional growth out there. That's right, because we're challenged with groundwater in the county. We've got productive ag land. So, I mean, you can look at the whole county and say, hey, maybe we can hit those 9,000 units, but that's not a sustainable growth pattern. So if we hone in as a first blush, if you will, areas with existing infrastructure, what is the additional unit capacity? Then with that information, we can dive a little bit deeper into local zoning. And we'll have to think probably duplex and quadplex and other opportunities, right? And condos that might have to all be part of the equation, but I would love to collect more information. And that's just one suggestion. And along that vein, give us an idea of what is the reality and the ability for us to get that number of units with our existing infrastructure.
That 9,000 number is homeowner occupied units.
Yes.
And so the overall housing needs assessment called for north of 12,000 if you added together rental and homeowner units, correct?
It was like a 16.
It was almost 17.
Yeah, because there is a market of like 120% AMI and above for sale units.
Yeah.
Construction is on track to meet
Okay,
that
so-
need, which was like,
What we're also not talking about is if we do open up, say even 1,000 units of fresh units, that may open up 500 to 700 units for sale,
Mhm.
which then increases that opportunity, because they may be waiting for that type of unit to open up so they can sell their existing home. That opens up another,
Yeah.
you know, it's a big stick.
yeah,
So
very great point.
that it's not just, hey, we're gonna do 1,000 and that's just 1,000, but it's 1,000 could turn into technically 2,000 if it was a 1-to-1 ratio of opening up.
Definitely.
So to your question, I just wanna, speaking from the small footprint home perspective, that number is much smaller, right? When we surveyed the county, just in our little spot checks, we weren't terribly scientific. We just kind of went around and we did some surveying, and we looked at the data, determined that, you know, in a lot of areas that are kind of lending themselves to this type, you're looking at naturally, historically, about 5% of the stock is sub 1,000 square foot footprint, right? And so this is one prong of a multi-prong approach to address that bigger number, those bigger numbers. And I think I just wanted to point out that, like, when you start to graduate from 10 units here, 3 units here, a little 4 pocket here, You go from that to hundreds of units, you're talking about big companies with teams of lawyers and teams of real estate experts, and just a totally different scale of an operation to engage with the local unit of government. And so, again, in the multi-pronged approach, there's a lot of lanes that need to be opened up for those types of operations. But one of the lanes that's been missing is this lane that, you know, a smaller fish can tackle, right? I can go in, you know, Doors of Hope and me can go in the city of Holland, 10-unit PUD, it's not that big of a deal. We don't have to have our own lawyer, you know, and teams of experts that work with some, but it's not as big of a deal. And so the county needs to have the ability to do those small projects in a way that's scalable, and we don't need to set our sights on a number that's way out of range of what small footprint can provide. It's probably a few hundred small footprint homes would make it a successful contribution to the overall need.
Oh, unquestionably. Yeah, I don't mean to suggest that, you know, the small home is the only tool
Right.
in the toolbox. But ultimately, we started this with, we've got a shortage of 15,000 living units, some rental, some homeowner. You know, then the small home concept, you know, presented itself. But would we benefit from considering other options?
And I think you are. I mean, you've got the revolving loan fund, you've got all these other project types that are in the cooker, right? And so maybe just centralizing that information and kind of having it all on a dashboard would be helpful.
Well, then we could add all that up and say, you know, we've got a 15,000 unit shortage. Everything that we have currently on the table in operation will answer X number of units. And then what do we have left?
And that's kind of what the housing needs assessment is saying when it says certain segments are on track based on, you know,
Well, for
That works
the,
in
for the
progress.
rental, but not for the homeowner. So, I mean, the small home thing, I think we need to push it and work diligently on that. But are we missing another component that might be more capable of, you know, covering a broader spectrum of need, and how would you go about it? Has any county anywhere ever like developed a plan that allowed for, you know, more building? You know, are there other instruments like, you know, big developers that, you know, could come in and with the proper guidance could create? Like, one of the things about the neighborhood developments is the price from the cheapest to the most expensive tends to be a pretty narrow band. And would there be an advantage to creating a development concept that has small homes, medium, larger, you know, light commercial,
Mhm.
you know, mixed in, and maybe some condos, and you know, that where you really put all the pieces of the puzzle on the table and ask, like, how can we put all these together to really come up with a number that's gonna put a dent in the need? And that's gotta be possible. The need
Yes.
wouldn't be there if it wasn't possible to meet it. And necessity creates that invention.
Mhm.
And would we benefit from maybe having a session where we look at everything? And with the idea that, you know, we're 15,000 units short. And what are different ways that we could,
So I think it's a good holistic, comprehensive question, just to bring it into perspective, right? Because you're asking a question that's really important in the sense that if we were to meet that need, there would be a generation of building stock that is of a certain style or quality, right? And that's also an important, you mentioned earlier, who's got skin in the game. We all have skin in the game in a sense that if we drop 15,000 units into the county, kind of all at once to meet that need, and we do it willy-nilly and without a lot of eye for quality, we're gonna have a built legacy
it'd be
tied to this
it'd be a
generation. That would be problematic, and to put it into perspective. The city of Holland, if you look up in the census, how many housing units are in the city of Holland as a whole, there's like 13,000 and change. So right now in the county, your new units, right, is greater than our biggest city. That's what we're talking about building.
Right.
And so you're asking the right question in terms of the mix, right? That can we broaden it out to have some of that commercial and some variety in the housing and some of it all goes into livability and the quality of the building stock that you're talking about bringing online, as opposed to just bringing online basically a city of Holland's worth of suburban sprawl across the county. Now, it would be distributed across the county, but it would blanket the county if we did it in a very clumsy way, which is the typical way, right?
Right, which we don't want. If we looked at all of the development plans for all of the townships. And added up everything that they think, they see in their future. Would we even, cover 5% of the 15,000 housing?
Do you think the townships are signing up for what they see as their proportion of that need, or do you think they're running
No, I
the
think
other
they're
direction?
looking at it very internally.
Yeah.
As, we're not real big on change. We really want to make sure that what we do meets all of our needs. So, yeah, I would submit that if we added all that up, it isn't
Really
there.
good question.
It could,
So,
could be though.
but it could be, but we don't even know, but it could
Yep.
be like half of it.
Yes, and Holland Township, for example, recently did an assessment of housing opportunities within their jurisdiction. They evaluated their existing zoning. And they looked at the housing needs assessment. Okay, well, this assessment says that our township needs to provide this number of housing units over time. They use that as the filter, examining their zoning, and it lines up. According to the township when they did this study. So yes, the way that we're set up, they're comfortable with as a township, right? The small footprint, something to have conversations about. They're saying we can accommodate what the need is in that township. More townships could do that type of assessment, and I think that would be really valuable. Then it is finding the partners, finding the capital, finding the right property, all that
Yeah,
takes.
there's no perfect example, or there's no perfect, weapon to say, this is what we gotta do, right? It's very, organic and it's based on the municipality and the people in that municipality. To your point, Pat, is I look at this project is a pipeline into the big funnel of housing. So that you have all these different pipelines that are trying to solve this problem, right? And this is just one that we have access to, have somewhat of a mission to control and to move forward. As just a county housing commission, we don't have the capacity to, in my opinion, to branch further than where we're at already. I think we're doing more than what most counties are doing from a housing standpoint anyways. But that conversation does need to be had. And I think all of us in our local areas can have those conversations with our our local municipalities and bring it up from an organic standpoint and say, from a county level, here's what we're talking about. You guys should be having these conversations. And if they're not, can we come present, or can we have these, come to Jesus moments? with
Yeah, I'm not suggesting some kind of centralized control, but rather, let's just say we analyze the whole situation. We say we're 15,000 units short for what the county really needs for employment, home ownership opportunities, entry level to wherever. And then we make the case for what each individual township might want to consider, there's a win for them, building their population. There's a lot of little townships around here that are dying. And they don't, I think of some of the towns like, up in, north of, Coopersville, yeah, that town's dead. You know, I mean, other than.
Well, I was up there last night, the Conklin Bar, and listening to Irish music. It's not dead there. It might be
No.
elsewhere in the community.
Right, but I mean, there's all these old businesses
Right.
that are, you know, idle. And,
You know, like, my question, just like interrupt is, in your analysis, don't forget about the impact on infrastructure and government services. And then we have the tax move. What's that gonna do to the ability to keep up? So there's a huge picture here, besides just the housing units themselves, that has to be considered.
absolutely, and like, can we benefit it by considering all those factors? And is anybody in the county doing that? You know, truly, infrastructure is a huge one. I mean, maybe a pipeline from Lake Michigan to bring water into the county would be part of the solution. And, you know, yes,
Oh, yeah.
it crosses all kinds of bureaucratic authorities and boards, but if we truly are short that much housing, it's gotta be creating a pinch for business, for the tax base, for you know, local governance. You know, if you look at some of these zoning boards, you know, there's a lot of older people that have been there forever and nobody runs against them. I'm not saying that's inherently bad, but you don't get a lot of fresh ideas when you got the same people doing the same job over and over again. But would it be possible to get together and actually have a strategy? And even if all we're doing is just identifying the issues, it's like, you know, we don't have infrastructure, water and sewer is a big issue. You know, we got a lot of dirt roads in Ottawa County. Is that a problem? Yes, probably yes. And how could we, or do we even want to increase the capacity? Or are we okay with having a huge shortage? Maybe it's not as big a problem as we might think it is, but, you know, but what is the real impact of being short that much housing? It's gotta have a negative effect on the community. I think.
Yes, land use planning is incredibly complex, especially when we've got 565 square acres in the county with 24 local units of government, each have their own plan. Like from a strategic impact perspective, as we oversee and help to administer, again, housing, farmland protection, brownfield redevelopment, groundwater preservation, that's on a countywide scale. We've got information to look at that. We're also one of the fastest growing counties in the state. We know this. We don't have a vision for growth. It's something I've been advocating for.
County master
And
plan.
wouldn't that
Yeah,
be
but that is,
something
you know,
maybe we should be looking at?
and here's kind of the route that I get. I've been putting feelers out for years on this need. Local, there's a parochialism, right? And then there's the county, you know, don't tell us what to do. So all of our work here is strategically saying, "Hey, what's pragmatic? How do we build relationships?" I'm keeping this line item in my performance measures of strategic impact of gain support among local units of government for a countywide vision of growth. And just getting local units to get around the table to talk about that. This is not something top down that says, hey, local units,
all
do
together.
this.
Right.
It's all together and say, hey, we need to, as a county, we have access to a lot of information. We can give that information to local units of government to
Right.
inform their planning.
To me, it's county being the facilitator, right?
Yes.
So bringing everybody together when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to water quality issues, all those things, the county is a facilitator, bringing all these municipalities together. To Pat's point, I think that should also include, and if it hasn't already, if I'm mistaken, it should be including the housing aspect of it, the demand / what that vision is for the entire county, because Allendale's different than Talmadge and so on and so forth. So you have so many different, it's like a family member has a different value than this person, but you're all part of the same family. So we all have to go in the same direction, or ideally.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of
Right.
movement to do that. So, just a little bit further on that. So we have a mitigation, like a proactive strategies index that was designed for groundwater challenges. There's 50+ mitigation techniques that are working on deploying to address groundwater. One of those mitigation techniques that's in that strategies document is a countywide vision of growth and planning that takes all those components into it. We still have people that don't believe we have a groundwater problem. So it's hard to get people around the table, 24 local units of government and elected leaders and turnover on planning commissions and term limits to say, yes, we should do this. But as a county, if we get in alignment with our commissions and our boards and our elected officials, say, we see the value in a countywide perspective, done the right way, that respects local control, but is informing our decision-making with data. We can move the needle on that. We just need some political will to do it. And we have an educational forum to teach people and educate them as to why and how it works. That's where I wanna take
Right.
it.
And then I think that goes back to the, you know, we all have skin in the game, but some people have more skin in the game. You know, if I were an employer of, say, 100 workers, and I've got a turnover problem, and in the exit interviews, they're saying, I can't afford to live here, the commute's killing me, I mean, for what I'm making, and the price of gas and the wear and tear on my vehicle, and the fact that, you know, I've got a buddy around the corner that's going to work, you know, in my neighborhood that's not in the county. Like that, I think we're really missing an opportunity. And, you know, a township that doesn't believe that we've got a water shortage problem, that probably is not an obstacle to development, because they're probably like, hey, we'll just go ahead and develop it. You know, so,
Water law.
so in a way, they're not our obstacle. You know, it may be in the long term a real problem, but, you know, to the townships that don't think they've got a water problem, they're not curtailing their development, you know, because of it. But wouldn't it be really special to actually get everybody together and just, you know, start identifying, you know, we need more water, we need more roads, we need, you know, these are all the things that have restricted our need to meeting the need of 15,000 units. And 10 years from now, will that, you know, assuming at the pace we're going, is that number gonna grow or is it gonna diminish? And I would suggest that it's probably gonna grow.
Yes.
So we're just postponing what could become even more critical. Or it profoundly changes the nature of the county by having a lot of people coming into work here and then leaving. And is that really what we want?
Yeah, I think you make a good point that even if we do nothing, the county's growing. And there's an increased strain on infrastructure and resources and so on. So as time goes on, this could be exponentially more of a problem.
Right, yeah.
Right.
I don't wanna stop this great conversation, but for the sake of time, I feel like that should be a next meeting agenda item that we can discuss, maybe a work group type of situation, and actually have that as an agenda item to focus on what that maybe looks like. And then that way we can, really hone in on that and give some time and thought to it.
Yeah, and I would only add, what you guys are doing is brilliant and it's fantastic. And I've been very impressed with how thorough you are. And by no means is this topic in any way diminishing, you know, the efforts of everybody here. It's just, is it possible to get a bigger picture?
Yeah.
And
No, it's
Grateful
good.
for you stating that.
And it's a good reminder that, yeah, we're in our lane here, but there is a bigger picture. That, you know, it's your job as housing commissioner, to ask that question. about
Right.
the Big picture. So,
And I think that's a great spot for next meeting.
Be great.
We're gonna move on to any new business. Paul, do you have anything?
I do not have any new business.
Public comments after hearing, all of our discussion. Anybody have anything?
I would just maybe add, kind of Pat, to your comment, and I was actually trying to look while we were here doing this, but, Vista has the statewide plans for housing, it's divided into regions, so we're part of Region F, which is 13 counties. And I know they're looking at it in a bigger picture, it seems like a lot of it's advocacy and stuff like that, but I just didn't know if anybody from this group was engaged in that. I know I've tried to get engaged and had difficulty. I know Housing Connect is our key contact there, and I've not been able to get engaged, but I didn't know if anybody from this team or the county was engaged. in those
And that's tough because 13 counties.
Right.
They're like,
Right.
you know, that's, yeah. I mean, to your point though, I haven't been invited. I don't know if anybody you guys have been invited or talked to, or
Part
I'm
of the-
sure you maybe have.
Sat in on some of the meetings as part of the development of the plan.
Okay.
Yes, and then Lakeshore Advantage was designated as that, or Housing Next, part of that. I think Housing Next designated as part of that entity to facilitate implementation of the plan in the 13 county region.
Okay.
Yeah, that just makes it really hard for impact. But
Right.
in any event, I'm glad you brought that up, Dave, and I can share that housing plan
Right.
with this group.
Well, to Pat's point, for maybe next, is to have Lakeshore Advantage, if they are in Housing Next, to have them as, if they're the implementation arms of this, to have them a conversation of that strategic planning of the county when it comes to housing and, you know, infrastructure and all that, because if they're working over here, but we're trying to go over here, then we're not utilizing our time effectively.
They are good partners, and I think it's a great idea and good timing to bring that in.
Thanks for bringing that up. Next meeting, October 2. If anybody has any objections to that. Yeah,
Future housing for persons. with disabilities. So I'm wondering when are those meetings and how is awareness being promoted for that for attendance? And I think it's great. It's a long time coming, but are these units gonna be accessible and affordable? Like 36-inch doors, the reinforcements for grandpas, people aging in place, the ones down who will want to downsize to smaller units. That gonna be accommodating to wheelchair lives.
Yes, those, yes, it was noted in the housing needs assessment, so it's one of those kind of prongs that we're looking at, from for sale units. Housing for our aging population, and then those, with disabilities. Having some initial conversations with some CMH staff, as well as a nonprofit organization that's involved in, constructing product, and housing units for the disabled population. They want to come into this area, they see it as a market opportunity, so really early conversations. I think as that starts to evolve, probably be discussed maybe more at the CMH board level, if not here as well. But those conversations are just getting started.
and we did talk about, the 4 units, essentially the 4 sizes that the small footprint homes would allow. That would be the 2 top size ones would allow for 36-inch wide doors, the wider hallways, you know, easier access, 0 barrier entry. Yep,
Yes.
for sure. Yep.
Yeah. We did connect too along that same line, with an individual that specializes in kind of ADA compliance, and he's gonna take a look at all of our plans and scan them, with that perspective in mind.
Yeah.
It's another tool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And then also I suggest reaching out to the high school students to let them know civically how to become engaged earlier, because if they go home and tell mom and dad, oh, we have a water crisis here in Ottawa County.
Yep.
They're younger.
Yeah.
get them involved.
Yeah, maybe they won't irrigate every day for 2 hours straight.
Take the showers that are too long.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Parents, they say.
Yeah, right. They need,
2 minutes.
they would like the excuse to say no, right? Thank you very much for coming. Yep. Yes.
Steve Johnson. Organization called Fix This Community. We, that's nonprofit, working in Ottawa County, in Kent County, providing housing, working with partners like Genesis and Flowing Place, et cetera, to build, housing for people with disabilities, it's what you want, developmental disabilities. One thing we're not looking for is the idea of building a building for the disabled people over here.
Mhm.
We like the small house concept, tiny home concept, because 40% of our membership would prefer their son or daughter to own a home, and then security renting. So there is a market, and there's some money there for that. But there's been no stock. Right. And that, of course, requires something much more than water, which is essential about transportation. You know, there's got to be some place, many of them work, or want to work, and they need to be able to access that. So transportation close to it is an important thing too, but just let's avoid the big, beautiful building that has all the disabled people. in it. That's isolation.
Yeah, and that's kind of the concept what we had been talking about of building communities, not just a building.
That is great, especially if people are living there intentionally.
Correct. Yep. Yep, and it takes all different types of people to make a community, so. Thank you for your comment. Next, any other public comments? October 2, if there's no objection, we'll stick with that date, and if you do have an objection, just email the group and we'll put it together. At that point, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.